It's the age-old question. Vintage or modern, which is better? Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back. Thanks for stopping by. I can't seem to check out sewing videos without someone voicing their opinion on how much better or worse vintage patterns are to work with. And each video is filled with pros and cons, but I am stubborn, and I don't want to believe it just because it is on YouTube. So, I had to check it out for myself. And what better way to do it than with a bit of friendly competition? Okay, so round one, the pattern pieces. First thing I've noticed, our reproduction pattern has 6 pieces. Our original pattern has 3. Now this is the number of pieces for the design that I am going to be doing. The original pattern actually has 4, and I have no clue how many pieces the reproduction has. Let's see here. It's a 14 pieces. So, yeah. I was looking at the pieces. One thing I did notice when I was cutting it out was that the tie version actually has a piece for the tie. Not sure what that is doing. We will find out though. What I'm going to do is kind of start with a little bit of a comparison. So we're going to pull most of these extra pieces out of the way. And we are going to grab the 2 front pieces and put them one over the other. I'm putting the new one over the old one because there's definitely a little bit of something that's been noticed. Trying to figure out, this says center, but this will have the 5/8 seam allowance, I believe. So it's really hard to see for sure where this will be going. I feel like, okay, here it says center front line. Here it says center front line. We are going to put them following each other. My PDF pattern is slightly uneven. That was just a bit of a pain in the butt. Here we are. We can ignore this part because even though I haven't done an original pattern, vintage pattern before, I'm pretty sure this is, well, it says fold line, so I'm pretty sure this is kind of used as the facing. Don't know what's going on at the rest of the neckline. I'm guessing bias tape, or maybe because it's an old pattern, they have you make the facing yourself. I don't know. Haven't done an old pattern before. We are seeing apparently a little bit of a sizing difference. And if you recall, this pattern is a 16. This one is cut to a 12 because it is supposed to give it the same bust measurement, which is a 30. I thought it was 34. This says 38 right here. Confusing. I guess the 38 is the actual size versus the bust size, which is your actual size, which is 34. So it has, I guess, about 4 inches of ease in it. I'm down with that. As you can see, we've got a little bit of shaping. We've got massive difference in the shoulders here. Like, I cannot even begin to show you how much different these shoulders are. The original, they extend out further. They're very straight across. I'm guessing this creates a bit more of an opening for the arm. The arms on this one do not have a little cut piece. I'm guessing you sew up. There are circles here. I'm guessing that is where you sew to when you're sewing up the side seam. That's my guess, definitely will create a difference in the style of the arms. So I'm interested to see how that turns out. We've got obvious difference in the neckline. This is really weird. This kind of almost feels like it goes back in, which is not going to create this swoop shape if it does that. So, not really sure. As you can see, this pattern has a little bit of a cutoff. You can do that with this pattern too. I know some people who use vintage patterns are like, what is this little notch here? What is this little notch on the pattern? So that's just the seam line. So when you follow the seam, when it folds over, which I cannot do on such a large piece, but when it folds over, it just follows the line, the curve already here, rather than having a piece sticking out, which your vintage pattern without that little cut edge will do. Nothing major, nothing particular. Another interesting difference, this has a cut up here, so you follow the dart along. This is your seam allowance, so clearly you're putting the dart in at the seam allowance. But this seems like it would be easier. This really seems like it would be easier. So that's these two pattern pieces. Let's get the back pieces. Here we go. We have the center back. We have the arm extending more. This is a little bit higher. The neckline on the back here is up a little bit higher. I feel like that is going to be my preference most likely. We have a dart. This one is in this area. Will be the size 12 that I'll be using. And the dart here, as you can see, seems to, I don't know if we can see it under the paper. This is this dart. The dart for the original is in this area and goes all the way up here. So it's off a little bit. Size-wise, if this is the sew to the sleeve, it looks like it's probably about the same in the bust. The waist for the new one appears to be slightly bigger, which I thought it should be smaller, because, like I said, with these patterns, for equal busts, we have the 16 and the 12. The 16 has a 28-inch waist on the old one, and it's a 26.5-inch waist for the new one. So you would think this one would be smaller. Did we really notice? Well, it was hard to tell with the other one because we've got this unique design element in the front. So it's really hard to say, just looking at the pieces, you know. I want to show this one upside down so bad because it's open in the bottom. Some of these old patterns, did people open them that way, or were they made that way? Somebody let me know. And of course, I cannot compare the other pieces. Wow, this is very different. Center back seam, we'll go with that, because that should follow us around about the same way. Interestingly, the grain line here and the grain line there, they're not quite even. One will be slightly off from the other. But as you can see, the new one is much bigger. Like it'll fall down much further. It is, the old pattern will make it like much shorter up here than the new one. So I'm interested in seeing the variation. I feel like this pattern here, the new one, Might give you more of that length in the back though. I'm not sure if you're going to see the difference quite as much though, because the top doesn't seem to go down quite as much. Again, this is why we are actually making up the items, is to actually see the difference between the two. But that is crazy. It does... it's weird. Let's see here. I can't do an actual measurement. It seriously looks like the new one actually has a larger waist. It's not supposed to have a larger waist. It could be because there is this detail in the front where the front goes all the way down and the pendulum connects over here. This could be thinner. I didn't pay too awful much attention to it. Up next, we are looking into the amount of fabric needed and the notions needed. Okay, round 2. Let's compare our notions and our fabrics. We'll start with the first one. We are doing style 3, and we have the size 16. Here's the first thing I notice. 35 inch, 39 inch, 54 inch. That is not how our fabric comes nowadays. But they're showing a 1 3/4 yard to 1 1/4 yard. Our new one for blouse A in a size 12 shows 1 3/4 yard to 1 3/8 of a yard. It's basically showing the same. We will find out for sure when I cut out the pattern. Additionally though, let's look. We need thread, of course. View A, which is the one I'm doing, we will need 5 1/2-inch buttons. And that's it for that, except for you have to go down and look here. Additionally, we need 1 yard of lightweight fusible interfacing. Let's see what else our old pattern uses. Fabric suggestions, sewing notions. Style 1, 2, and 3, 2 spools of thread. That's specific. I don't think we'll be worrying specifically about 2 spools of thread. I'm not so sure spools are the same size anymore nowadays. But we need seam binding. There, that explains my previous question. We are using seam binding. This is either something I will need to purchase or make. Like I said, I haven't pulled the fabric yet, so looks like I'm going to need probably about 3 yards of fabric. We also need buttonhole twist. Okay, I'm going to have to be completely honest with you. I have not heard of that one before. That is going to require some research. Style 3, we need 5 buttons. It does not tell you what size. And we need crescent shoulder pads. Ooh, that actually kind of explains the shoulder shaping at the top. So, coming up next, fabric. Let's see how much fabric it actually takes. Okay, and next round, we are comparing how much fabric we need for this project. As you can see here, overlapping on this end, side by side. This is the vintage pattern. This is the modern pattern. As you can see, we need a few more inches for the modern pattern. However, this pattern requires bias binding. So if you want to make that yourself, you may need, you know, a couple additional inches to get that cut out. Maybe, maybe not, who knows. You do you, and we'll move on to the next round. I forgot to mention, additionally, you do need interfacing for the newer pattern. Okay, now we are moving on to the pattern instructions. See, I got them both side by side here. Again, there's my printed instructions because my original pattern did not come with them. First things first, the vintage pattern instructions actually show you how to do these buttonholes. Now at the very end, we get this right here. If desired, make worked or machine-made buttonholes when blouse is complete. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Moving on from there. Next one, ties. I'm not doing one with ties. And I feel like the newer version doesn't even have ties to it. Let me check. Okay, found out what it was. The newer version only has the ties on the version with the collar. And I'm not doing the one with the collar. I'm not doing the ties anyways. Old version lets you do ties on either one. So, you know, go vintage. Point for vintage right now. Anyways, newer version, when we start off, we do stay stitching, which I have already done, and that'll be shown here in a second, so you can see what I've accomplished. But from there, both of them move on to getting your darts done. So we're going to get started in on that. Here we have all the pattern pieces, new and old. Having this printed out makes it so much easier, so much quicker to just tell them apart which one's which. So happy little accident with the pattern issue for sure. But as you can see, separate these. I have taken the time to draw in the darts, and I've done that on both these ones and the vintage. Additionally, we have got the, whoopsies, I missed a stay stitching. Oh, well, that's cool. We'll do that real quick. Other than the one I missed, we have stay stitching on all of them per instructions. So we're going to get those darts done and the stay stitching I missed. Next step is to sew the front to the back, sewing at both side seams and the shoulder seams. And as you can see on the modern pattern, we have to sew from the dot down the side to indicate where the actual side seam is at. Okay, moving on to the next step. We've got the bodices sewn up. Next up, we're working on the flouncy peplum. I can pronounce that, I swear. We're moving on to that part. Both directions. We sew on these. However, the modern one has you next actually sewing this. To this, there's a little thing you're supposed to do. Cut in here, sew, cut in here, and then you should be sewing along here so that your dart flows into the bottom portion of the peplum. But the vintage version has you putting your bias tape on the bottom. Now mine is very thin, and I have the double folded. It will be, because that's what I had available at my Walmart. But it'll be unfolded like this, and this will be sewn on and folded up, so it'll be fairly similar. It'll be close enough. The directions do say to actually, here in a sec. Directions do actually say up here. Directions do say to make the bias tape, but yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm doing store-bought. I do have a little bit of something to say about directions from both modern and vintage. up here in the sewing, that is where you find the seam allowance to use. This one's a little bit better, the vintage, because it's up here at the top. But I still say, I don't care. What seam allowance to use should be right here, at the very top of where the instructions start. Like on this one, here's the sewing directions. Should say, like, right here, use 5/8 inch seam allowance. That's just my personal opinion. But anyways, we are going to get started on these, and I'll show you where I get to after that. So, very quick update. I got the bottom sewn onto the top, and I'm doing my watching this, you know, not paying attention to something right there. Not paying attention to something right there. Cutting. Still not catching on. Looking at this photo. And yep, I realize it. I wasn't supposed to do the dart in the front. Did I do the dart in the front already? Why, yes, I did. So, yeah, we're working with it. I can still get it done just fine. It's just a little bit, I wouldn't say harder necessarily, just not as easy. I think the way they have it done here, probably a little bit easier. So, you know, just in case you're working with this, you know, read the directions. I did read the directions before I started, I swear. I did read the directions before I started. Did I remember them? Apparently not. So yeah, moving on. Okay, we have got the bottom sewn onto the modern version. And here we have the edging done on the vintage version. Set that right there. So next up, for the vintage version, we will be sewing this onto here. And I have my little dots to match up with this, and our modern version. Next step is the facing, which will be sewing these seams. Come on. These seams will all be sewn together, and then that will be sewn onto there, and we'll go from there. Okay, you see here, this is the modern one. Facing is now on. Looks pretty. We will be moving on to doing the hem, which we've already done on most of the other one. We did it on the back peplum part. This one, we'll take the facing, we will turn it this way, and then it'll be sewn along here, turn back right side out, and this will be, when you turn it on, that'll be up like this, and you'll take the rest of this, and it'll be folded over twice, and we will just do a narrow hem, sewn hem along the bottom. Easy, simple, but the vintage version, which I have sitting over there, you can see a little corner probably, is where I'm getting a little confused. So hold on one sec. Okay. I think I might zoom in just a little bit. Okay. This is the front of the vintage pattern. It goes over here. I have some marks that you probably can't see, but that is where I will be turning it under all the way to the bottom, and that will be where the button band goes. Now this will be similar to the modern version in the sense that we will put the right sides together, folding it at that line, and then this will be sewn and turned inside out. Now, however, at the same time, it is showing that you are supposed to use bias tape. It's a little fuzzy, and the directions, I'm just not sure. Hem facing and neck edge, style 1. I'm not doing style 1, but you come over here. Hem facing and neck edge, style 3. Make same as for 1. Really? Really, vintage version? You couldn't have just said hem facing and neck edge, style 1 and 3? Would that have made more sense? Yes, simplicity, that would have made more sense. So, yeah. Moving on, though. Stitch under shoulder and front edge, or finish with seam binding. Turn front edge to outside a long fold line to form hem facing. Stitch neck edge. Finish remaining neck edge with bias facing, extending ends over hem facing. Okay. That's A. B. Turn hem facing to inside, based. Slip stitch at shoulder seams. Makes enough sense, really, except when you actually look at the pattern itself, or the pattern, the project itself. See if I can get this turned in a way that we're kind of seeing. This is back neck. This is the front. So the turning point is right here, which means we need to put bias tape from here all the way up to the shoulder seam, all the way around the back, and back over to here. Sorry, I'm moving that. But if you put bias tape in, and even if you stitch it down at the shoulders, that bias tape is not going to stay down. You need to put in either a full facing or like actually stitch around here. Now the original design. Hold on. Old pattern. This is the one. It only shows the back to this guy. It doesn't show the back to this. But if this was here, they don't have a stitch line on here. So you either have to make a decision to fold this, and when it's, you know, folded back inside out, and it's right side out, and it's like this, you know, it's folded over here, to actually stitch along here, and probably stitch along down there so that it, you know, matches. Yeah, which directions clearly don't say to do. Or do a stitch like the bottom, which doesn't completely hide the hem. You do get the slight little marks from the where you're stitching it. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm either completely missing something in the directions. Personally, I think the directions are just not detailed enough. Downside to vintage. I don't know if it's just them assuming that you're going to do whatever you want to do or what, but yeah, that seam binding tape is not going to stay down on that curved edge. So I might just put it together and see what happens if I want to create that seam line, or if I want to just go ahead and do the hand-stitched hem on it. I'm not really sure, but it's not going to stay down just being tacked at the shoulders. There's just no way it's going to do that. But anyways, once I figure that out, the next step or same step to equal to put these on the same grounds, meaning the bottom and the facing both being done. This will then require this one little bit here to be sewn. So that'll just be the bottom here. This will be turned this way, and again it'll be under. So you'll have this little bit here, and this of course will be, you know, see if I can make this kind of look like what it'll be like. There you go. That'll be looking like that. So you have this little bit here, and it'll just fold up here and probably turn under, and then that little bit will be stitched. This here will just be turned under, but we will have buttons and buttonholes on each side. Buttons on one side, buttonholes on one side, on the other side. And that will hold this portion of the facing down. So anyways, we'll get started on, and here we are. This is a quick update on the vintage pattern, as I was just talking about, since I finally got this sewn in. It seems to hold just fine across here. Trying to like holds itself down because it doesn't start till over here. But this is what I was talking about. This right here. That does not stay down on its own. And I actually put, you can see here, a pin there, just as if it was tacked down at the shoulder like it told me. This is what it does. And it's been ironed. It has stay stitching. It doesn't stay down, which I knew it wouldn't. So somebody, if you do vintage patterns, please tell me what is supposed to happen here, because following the pattern, this is what happened. Anywho, other than that, looks pretty good. I think I'm gonna have to do something about this. I might just do, here's the hem. I might just make it match the hem, so it'll have little tacks all the way around here. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We'll fiddle with it for a few, and we'll be getting down to, after that, we'll have to do the bottom hem here. The modern one, I've got the hem done on it. So once I figure this one out, we'll pull them out, show you where I'm at, and what'll be next is hemming the sleeves and then doing the buttons. And here we are. Modern one, vintage one. As you can see on the vintage one, I did go ahead and do the neckline to make it match the hem, and finished off the hem, as well as clipped the inside of the waistline on the vintage one. Modern one, additionally, finished off the bottom hem. Now we're going to just sit here and straighten these up all nice real quick so that they look good. And finally, buttons. White ones, blue ones. I didn't have enough on hand to make them both the same. Conclusion. Voila! As you can see, there's a very clear difference between the two. Now I want to start with the finishing measurements because there's a tad bit of an issue. The modern measurements are 35 inches for the bust and 28.5 inches for the waist. The vintage measurements are 36 inches for the bust and 27 inches for the waist. The measurements are never exact to the pattern envelope, but let's compare. Pattern measurements for the modern are 34 inches for the bust and 26.5 for the waist. Pattern measurements for the vintage are 34 inches for the bust and 28 inches for the waist. See the problem here? The vintage pattern had a finishing measurement 1 inch smaller than stated. So 1 negative mark for the vintage pattern. Now let's go over the construction. First, the directions. Well, the vintage pattern told me I needed shoulder pads, but the pattern never told me to put them in. Maybe it was assumed back in the day, but it's a step needed in modern times. Another negative mark. Now, the pattern instructions were also easier to follow on the modern pattern. As for the pattern pieces, there were fewer to the vintage pattern, and it used less fabric, unless you needed to make the bias tape. The vintage never said anything about use of any interfacing, and I personally found I liked the structure of the interface top better. As for the actual sewing, I came across a few things. I thought the dart was going to be easier on the vintage pattern, but had I done the modern pattern correctly, it would have been much easier. I also found I like working with facings much more than bias binding. Now, finally, which one looked more like the pattern picture? Well, the vintage one. The peplum was fuller like the picture, the neckline was wider like the picture, and there was more length to the sleeve. In the end, the vintage pattern won out in creating the same lines as the picture. That being said, I like the way the modern one looks better. Final conclusion? You do you. There are techniques I like, you may prefer others. If you picked up this pattern, it is probably because you like the way the blouse was drawn, and to get that look, you will need to go with the vintage pattern. So that's it. Thanks for stopping by. Please be sure and do all the things. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and if you feel like it, go ahead and hit thumbs down, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!